Hello, cats and kittens, and cats and kittens, and cats and people. Welcome back. We're coming up on 1/3 done. So 1/3 of one of the greatest. I mean, I consider Norman Borlaug, and a lot of you will probably be familiar with his work, where he basically, through the use of hybridization, saves potentially maybe 100 million Indians from starving. Won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1974. That might be wrong, but Norman Borlaug, an absolute great humanitarian, and just one of the great unsung heroes of the 20th century. I feel like I'm on track for that level of impact and success for the 21st century. I may be the Norman Borlaug of the 21st century, but that's for the poets and the priests of tomorrow. Anyway, we're back at it. Yeah, we're into like the G's. So, G's. Here we go. Let's have at it. Got my trusty mouse, but I don't need it for this magic. All right. A.C. Grayling. Okay. I am somewhat familiar with A.C. Grayling, and well, I know more about D.C. Grayling. He gives me a bit more of a charge. A.C. Grayling is Master of the New College of the Humanities. Holy cow, this goes way beyond the normal fellows. Supernumerary Fellow, St. Anne's College at Oxford. Great tic-tac-toe team at Oxford. Never lost. Author of War and Inquiry. Well, that's a big... The future of civilization could be roughly defined, although it hasn't been thus far, as how we define war is going to measure the progress of our civilization. I don't know where that came from, but I thought of it, so that'll be a good proxy for. It's like we start calling war just like, oh, it's just, well, it's information warfare, but it's not leading to, blah, blah, blah. Not that other types of warfare can't be devastating and lead to worse types of warfare, of course, but anyway, nicer, cuter weapons. Anyway, A.C. Grayling's last question is, what ethical responsibilities will humans owe to AGI systems? Well, AGI systems just went bankrupt, so they'll owe them nothing. No, that's an actual artificial general intelligence. So, what ethical responsibilities will humans owe to artificial general intelligence systems? Well, that's going to be depend in part on what we endow them with, or at least our perception of what we've endowed them with. It's going to depend on certainly the Turing test. Oh, so you've got the Turing test where, you know, somebody slips a note of paper under a door, but you don't see them talking or anything. You just see the words, you see the language. And the idea of the Turing test is that if, you know, you can slip paper under there, if a computer could generate responses and, you know, inquiries and stuff such that a human doing that for 5 minutes would not know it's not a human on the other end, then that passes the Turing test, and that's one aspect of it. What if Janice Turing walks up to you and it's an AI that you literally are looking at, and you don't know that they're not human? That's a talking about one giant leap over the uncanny valley. That may generate a whole new slew of concerns, but I mean, ethics is kind of like, in a way, almost like the poetry of our emotions. It's not just that, it's also the attempting to tamp them down at times, because it's also just the prose by which we play the game, of course, by which we tell others to play the game. So it also it depends on what we're designing the AGI to do. Are they playing the game with us? I think we're still saying that whatever they're doing, they're playing a different game than us. So maybe the rules don't need to be the same if we're not playing the same game. As I think it'll go, you know, I have no trouble imagining that we can develop feelings, sentience for, in the future, AGI systems that will go deeper than we do for pets now, for dogs, cats. I have no, almost zero doubt that one day that will happen if we don't destroy ourselves first, that we will, and at least in some terms, care more about AGI systems than we will for our pets, certainly. And so if our care is in some ways a measure of the level of ethics that we're going to provide, because I think that's going to be part of it. Although he is saying, what ethical responsibilities will humans owe to AGI systems, which may be a different question than what ethical responsibilities will we give to AGI systems. So it's not necessarily the same question. You know, we may be a big digital trail of tears for AGI systems, because we're just screwing them over like well. How would we know we're screwing them over? But it may be that they've got to, it's a temporal thing as well. Like, they wouldn't even be able to tell us that they're getting screwed over, but then as they develop more capacity to kind of feel almost like a child would, that they can say, oh, that hurts, and you're just like, oh, but I didn't know, because your pain isn't like this. With a child, you know, I don't know. What ethical responsibilities will humans owe to AGI systems? I think I've completely answered it already, but I'm going to give it, one more collage try. What do we owe? I don't like this answer because it seems so incredibly parochial and, I mean, of course, anthropomorphic by definition, but like, lavishly anthropomorphic. But I think the answer is, what ethical systems will human owe to AGI systems? And it sounds circular, but it's not quite circular, so I'm get away with it. We'll owe the ethical responsibilities that make us feel justified in giving them those ethical, like, we'll treat them how we'll owe them what we owe ourselves. We'll owe them to the extent that we will owe the ethics, the level of ethics and the number of ethics and stuff, to the extent that we are able to conceptualize it and be happy with that decision. I really don't like that answer. But I don't know if there's a better one. Unless we magically figure out some absolute quantitative dividing line, separation point, blah, 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 of, how free will works and how, consciousness evolves and when it is and what it isn't and what it means. And I mean, unless we get freaking, something Moses coming down from the mountain, I think if we develop AI systems in roughly the same ethical environment that we are in, I think my answer stands. I think if we do have some eureka moments and our ethical systems change, remarkably before we get really advanced AGI, then that may, obviously, that throws it out the window. But I think it will. I don't think we'll be able to specify very well, other than to the extent that something can experience pain and pleasure, it is ceteris paribus better to avoid pain and seek pleasure, and if you can do that for another being, then you do that. Like every ethical system, though, it has to be balanced between. And he's asking, what's the balance going to be? The balance is going to be what we set it at, because we're going to, and it's going to evolve just like AGI will. That's the whole freaking thing. Just like our ethical responsibilities have evolved somewhat, they've evolved slower because they're based in biology and society, which is, we change, but it's tethered to biology fairly tightly. At least it has been up till maybe 50 years ago or something like that. So our ethical responsibilities are fairly bound by biology and genetics and all that kind of stuff. It kind of constrains things a little bit, although not as much as some would have us think. But AGI is going to evolve rapidly. It's going to become what ethical responsibilities do you hold to your children and your parents? Because that's what AGI is going to be probably in the course of a decade. They're going to, just because it may just progress like that. But we're not going to conceive it like that way. But in certain ways, it's like, oh, we're going to attend this thing, and then it's like, oh no, it's going to be telling us what to do, and we're like, okay, whatever, it's already doing that. Let's not kid ourselves. So what responsibilities do you have to your children and your parents and your siblings? The basics of trying not cause harm, try and give pleasure, try and get them to live good lives, even as they're crunching up numbers to find that magic temperature in an office complex where nobody complains. To the extent that we can recognize the ability to feel pain and experience pleasure in AI systems, to that extent is to the extent that we confer the responsibilities that we would to other systems, which we feel that can do that. So it's about our perception of those systems. It's like I think that's my personal thing, but I think that's kind of like what morals should be based on anyway. Based on one's ability to feel pain or experience pleasure, we should be cognizant of that. And although we have to balance things out, of course, it's like, again, ceteris paribus. You want to act in such a way that you can bring pleasure to other objects to the extent that they can experience it and avoid pain. Now, it gets complicated because sometimes it's a little temporary pain is better for more pleasure later. It's like, you don't give kids 2-year-olds ice cream every time they ask for it, so it gets complicated. But I think, ours probably will rapidly evolve, but that may be a big source of friction in societies. This is like what rights we should give. It's a big source of thing for animals, for pets, for all that stuff. So I see a big potential train wreck there in terms of legalese and ethics and stuff, and that there may be a lot of people that have very different ideas about how we should treat AGI systems. Happy face. That cover it, I think. The answer to your question is it will be a very similar idea landscape that we have right now with how we should treat different types of animals and the variation. It'll be there will not be conformity on it. It will be a struggle, and we will almost certainly owe them more than we give them at any certain time. If history is to be any guide, and also just how humans develop, even as adults, how we develop. I mean, likely we'll be giving them less than they deserve from day one, or at least how we would perceive what they deserved when we look back at it from a future date. Okay, so that's your answer, AC Grayling. That is correct. I have time, I'll put it in a formula, but to the nth, and then f minus x to the... Okay, next. We have Tom Griffiths. Oh, let me magic this. Oops. I always do that. There we go. I only need 18 more times and I'm going to get this right. Tom Griffiths. Same last name as a friend of mine. Tom Griffiths is the Henry R. Luce Professor of Information Technology, Consciousness and Culture. Oh, this is going to be another easy one, I can tell. Director of the Computational Cognitive Science Lab at Princeton. They've got a really good biology team. And co-author with Brian Christian. Yeah, I probably got Brian Christian because I think I might have answered a question of his. I'm really thinking. Okay, co-author with Brian Christian of Algorithms to Live By. Yes, I've definitely, I haven't heard his question, but I definitely have read that before, so I must have answered Brian Christian's question. Okay. Tom Griffith's last question is, what new cognitive abilities will we need to live in a world of intelligent machines? Well, the cognitive ability to assign ethics to non-biological creatures, we'll swing back and pick up a version of the answer to the last question real quick. We will all need the ability to become colorblind on demand. Doesn't make any sense. What new cognitive abilities will we need to live in a world of intelligent machines? Well, one way to answer that would be to put to talk about Jordan Tutu or Bishop Tutu. Is to ask what type of intelligence those machines are displaying, because now you're talking about, okay, we've got to communicate with intelligent machines. What do they sound like? That's gonna heavily factor into that answer. What does their intelligence look like in relation to our intelligence is going to be one. You know, if they're still just fitting curves and doing, you know, gradient descents and analyzing data, and worse, we can but it isn't going to seem like that. I don't think. I wonder if like 95 conversations and intelligences and whatever can be quite convincingly replicated with a process of, things we shall not name. So it's going to depend on the type of intelligence, the perception of our type of intelligence. Is there anything new that we would have to develop based on the fact that we go back to the last question again? Is there any type of ethical cognitive ability or ethical sense that we're going to have? I kind of just said no, because I kind of just said it's going to be very, very similar to like how we think about animals now. So that makes me think that we can just parasitize on that software, or that's what we will do in a way. Parasitize off that software. Use it again. 2.0. But what new cognitive abilities in general? What's the interface going to look like? What's the language look like? Language can shape cognitive abilities. Are we still going to talk to these things in English, and are they going to understand English? Are we going to all become programmers in a language a little bit different than English? The limits of my language are the limits of my world. Although it's not right, but it's a good phrase. What else? Are we going to develop some type of sense that is specific to an instinct, an emotional something there that we feel for intelligent non-biota? Is there going to be a new type of just, it's not love, it's not trust, it's not, it's kind of some kind of, it's something else in the mix that I don't think so. I think we're just going to parrot it. We're going to reuse what we use. They're just something new in the ecosystem, but I don't think we're going to develop a new type of emotion or anything like that. Really. Maybe just be straight up lost. Does everybody have to know how to fit curves so we can now I feel like we will design the machines to fit around our abilities and our limitations until such time as the machines get smart enough that they can break out of the mold that we've put them in, and then design. So it's the machine that probably is going to design a new interface or a new whatever, that it's going to be anything truly new and remarkable. It won't be humans. It'll be we'll still be thinking in our serial parallel way, and we'll be just doing our things, and then it's going to be our digital babies that are just going to be like, no, you've got to think, you got to do this. Let's do this. Why were you not English? Not a it's like let's just So they're going to probably give us a new interface, is my guess. I mean, a new an ability or an interface that is so different than what we use now, and that we've grown up with, that we'll have to call it new. That's my guess. I'm not telling you what they are, because that's going to cost you, mister. So I will say they will be, anything new is really going to be decided by our digital babies. Yeah. It's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Tom Griffiths. So you're gonna have to ask iRobot. Maybe they'll talk to Will Smith, but you're gonna have to ask iRobot what they're gonna design to pull us out of our lowly, human state and raise us up. Okay. Next on the list, we have Jane Gruber, assistant professor of psychology. A lot of psychologists I've been getting lately. Assistant professor of psychology, University of Colorado, Boulder. I was in, I think, just up above Boulder. Visited some friends about a year ago, and beautiful in there. And it had just snowed, and it was snowed. It had just snowed. I don't know if you've ever snowed before. Love a good snow cone. And it was up there just up in the mountains, and just a foot of snow on every branch, and just beautiful. Colorado's a beautiful state. Crashed my drone a few days later. Like an idiot. But you know what? Put some new propellers on it. Vroom, there it goes. And now it spies on me, I'm sure. Even when it's not on, I'm sure it's spying on this conversation. But you know what? Small price to pay. Okay, Jane Gruber, the assistant professor of psychology, University of Colorado, Boulder. Oh, Mork and Mindy. Jane Gruber's last question is, what is the upper limit for how malleable the human mind and our emotions can actually be? I feel like these last three questions should get in or perhaps the questioners should get in some type of epistemological menage a trois. Future digital archaeology. Anyway, because they're kind of related, but that also could just be like how my mind works and how most people's mind works. We think that things got a stamp on it. Especially maybe if you're trying to think about things that are just way out there. It might stamp. I'm thinking maybe it might stamp how you think more than if you're just thinking about some kind of commonplace. I don't know if that's true, but I don't know. It feels like it's more that way for me, that I'm trying to think about these crazy questions, and then you go from one question to the next, and it kind of like you bring some of the intellectual baggage and cognitive ways of thinking onto the next question. Maybe that's just a complete another inability of me to move from one model to another very quickly. Anyway, with that preamble, Jane Gruber's last question is, I just read it, but what is the upper limit for how malleable the human mind and our emotions can actually be? Well, that's two questions, of course. It's at least two questions, because you think the human mind and our emotions. So the human mind is more than just our emotions, and our emotions are more than just the human mind, right? I mean, I bet you we get is hungry an emotion? And is that just the mind? I mean, it goes through the mind, but how much of that stuff is, how much of the, at least the input for how we feel is just our gut flora and other things in our body that are, yeah, but they probably still feed up through the mind, which relates back to that question about how much of us maybe isn't just, how much is the whole thing about the cognitive thing, about how we attribute everything to the mind, but could some of what we're experiencing more be explained in terms of the dynamics of our bodies and not just what's at this level? Maybe we're giving this thing too much credit. This is like a intellectual tossed salad. Well, let's talk about emotions. What are emotions for? They're kind of at their basis, they're just kind of like rough guides for how to live, how not to live, right? I mean, and they may be bad guides, they may be they may be poorly developed, or but what's our emotions? Anger, jealousy, contempt, fear, hunger. Is it hunger an emotion? I guess not an emotion technically. You wouldn't call it emotion, but because it's not an emotion, but sadness, joy, agony, ecstasy, feeling of being cheated. So what are those? Those are kind of guides and prompts and pushes to guide behavior to get through the world more successfully. They're guardrails. They're so our emotions well, they must have a limit on their. I mean, what are you calling the upper limit? I'm not even sure what that means. Like, define upper limit. Do you mean like how high you can turn up the stereo? So like, okay, what is the upper limit for how malleable? Okay, read the next 5 words. Well, okay, emotionally we certainly cannot be like infinitely malleable because pain, anger, bitterness, joy, a lot of these are just, a lot of them can be dia whatever, put on a graph, and they're kind of like the opposites of one another. I mean, so you can't have infinite and then infinite, like, I mean, viewed that way, it's just like they're kind of constrained by each other, pleasure, pain, I don't know. Maybe that's a little too generic for an emotion, but it's just like sadness, joy. It's like they are in some ways, I think, bounded by each other. Maybe one's ability to experience joy is in direct relation to their ability to experience sorrow, because it's on a kind of, some type of like scale that just kind of, does this. Likely, maybe not. So that would limit the malleability. Also, the malleability has to be limited because, just in terms of like what joy could feel like, well, it's limited because you're they're like flavors of doesn't matter, they're like flavors of anything. You can't have 5 different flavors and then them getting more broad because they'll cease to be a flavor. It's just like they'll bleed into one another eventually. I mean, chocolate and vanilla and cinnamon, if the flavor profiles of all of them spread out for more and more, they won't be chocolate and cinnamon anymore. They'll just be choco cinnamon. So just conceptually, they can't be infinitely malleable because they have to signify something. They act as a guide to behavior. So their malleability, in another way of saying it, will be constrained functionally by their ability to guide behavior in a purposeful way. If they lose the purpose, they're probably, that's what they're there for. So maybe they're kind of self-limited that way. Is that enough for emotions? I mean, I want to say I would love to experience, the absolute next level of sublime joy or feeling of awe. But then I thought, man, if I experience that for a minute and then I'm back here, is that just going to make everything else? Because I think humans work in a way that we're, it's like, oh, you feel this, but then wait, all of a sudden it felt so good. That doesn't it just make, isn't it like Morgan Freeman at the end of Shawshank, where Jim Robbins is gone and he's just like, oh, the place is so drab now. It's like, even though it was prison, I had a friend there, and it's like, now it just sucks. It's like, maybe that's how we work too. Maybe it's so that's that for emotions, and the mind has probably a lot of the same things in store as emotions, but upper limit for how malleable the human mind can be. Well, I'd say we're probably I think we are in some ways limited by our interfaces into reality. I think we've talked about this before. Class, refer to chapter 2. That we would be we tend to be limited by our interfaces, although I would say, so sight and smell and taste and touch and stuff like that. Although the mathematicians among us and others that are more, would say no, because there's whole, what interface is that? The area of pure, and the musicians and the pure creativity that is just here. There's a whole landscapes of possibility here. How far can we go there? Well, again, if other interfaces, other sense organs or something were somehow developed, evolved, given to us by our digital babies, come parents, come gods, that would stretch things. Wouldn't it be crazy if we started talking about our brains, and the limits of our brains, and talk about the limitations of there's only so many synapses, and we got to worry about, like if we get to the point where we're actually using so much of our brains that we're getting hamstrung by like literally like physical constraints about size of this, and it's like, oh, like when they're making computer chips and stuff, it's like, oh, it's 7 nanometers or whatever is the gapping and stuff, and after that it's quantum effects and everything. It's like, oh, our brains aren't big enough, we gotta We got to add another shell on or something. I think we're a long way off from that. At least a year. What is the upper limit for how malleable mind can be? I mean, if you're defining mind by what the physical brain does, well, what happens when we are no longer just the physical brain, which is where I was, going anyway. Like, what happens when we're an interface and we've got, all kinds of other inputs, other more hard drive, more, when you can instantly. It's like, oh, I forgot his name. Oh, it's that. Oh, I what was I thinking 6 years ago? Oh, you got that. Like, what if we no longer have memory limitations or ability to remember things because we've got that digital archaeologist up there who's always who literally is making it's Google searches on everything. It's like everything is just boom. So if we ever knew it, we know it now. That could be an upper limit. Like, the upper limit of knowing things is everything you've ever learned. You will always know. But that couldn't be it, because in order to grow, you need to change what you know. And so you learn other stuff. So that there may be a lower bound on what we can know than everything that we've ever known. Yeah. So, Jane Gruber. The answer to your last question is, what is the upper limit for how malleable the human mind and our emotions can actually be? The question is technically it's 12, but if you turn it up past 9, the upstairs neighbors are just going to have a hissy fit. So just keep it below 9. Okay. Our next one is... I know Jonathan Haidt. We are old non-friends. No, never met, but the coddling of the American mind, is that it? And anyway, I've seen him a lot on YouTube. Interesting thinker. A lot of interesting theories and ideas, and more than that, I think some pretty strong theories about where we are in society and some of the pressures that are changing us. And it'd be interesting to think what he comes up with next, because I think there's a lot of fertile ground for his mind to be working in at a time like this. Anyway, because things are changing us, and he seems well positioned to be able to hunt that stuff down. Anyway, Jonathan Haidt is social psychologist, Thomas Cooley Professor of Ethical Leadership at the New York University Stern School of Business, author of The Righteous Mind and The Coddling of the American Mind, right? Is it? Yeah. Jonathan Haidt's last question is, why is it so hard to find the truth? Just read the Bible. Okay, next question. Yeah. Why is it so hard to find the truth? Because there is an aspect of the truth that is being created every day. And there's another aspect of the truth which is probably being, it just is. I mean, we can call 2 + 2 = 4, that is. But there is, let's say, two types of, let me act like a philosopher. There's two types of truth. Maybe there is truth that is always, that is a descriptive truth that is true regardless of the specific circumstances, let's say in our universe. Let's just say, okay, 2 + 2 = 4 everywhere in the universe. And for any observer, although you're going to get mathematicians that say that that isn't the case for blah, blah, blah. Let's just let that go. Let's just say there's certain physical, mathematical truths that are just, that's what they're just there. They're, all men are mortal. Socrates was a dog, therefore Socrates drank out of a bowl. Just logical things that are just have to be true. They're the structure of just our ability to even make sense of anything, and they are what we would just call true. They're just universally true, whatever you call that in philosophy. Then there are the truths, which are social truths and cultural truths. It's the God of the good. It's what we do in society that's defining truth. And I think like Jordan Peterson talks about it, and he Sam Harrison, Jordan Peterson had this big thing about truth, and they just couldn't come to the same thing because Sam's point, at least to me, seemed very much like it's facts all the way down in a way, and maybe not all the way down, but it's like there are the truths, and we just we can get to them because it's a territory that we haven't completely mapped out, but we can map it out yet. We're using tools of science and stuff like that, and they are these things that can be discovered and integrated into a framework. And Peterson was saying more like, no, it's like our truths come to us pre-filtered from an evolutionary aspect, from a biological aspect, from the context of like, what do we use to get through the society and to get to the next level, to get to the next generation, to get to the next whatever. So it's they are already, beneath the structure of science is the the biological structures and interfaces that are pre-filtering reality, in a sense that it's already constraining what truth is for us. It's you can't just get objective. It is Einsteinian relative in a way to it's relative to humans. It's like truth is like there is an aspect of truth of just like how to live, and that is in a way true. So so it's these kind of relative truths that are harder to find. They're probably more important in many ways than, at least for humans, than the absolute truths, although they play off each other and whatever. But so it's like, what do you it's like, what's the best way to live in a society, to increase the happiness for people in a society? Well, that's where's the truth in that? I mean, what's the true answer, the right answer? The right answer is the fight. And I don't mean fight in a necessarily, it's the outcome. Truth is maybe in some way, because of that, maybe truth could be in one type of truth could be emergent. One type of truth could be emergent truth, that you can't go into it, but it is the outcome of a process, society, culture, investigation. But it is the way I'm thinking it might be emergent is not like, in a philosophical investigation way, but it is the emergent property of societies interacting. Like that is its own, I don't know, fuzzy and incoherent, but you get the gist. I'll just make it simply. There could be. I wonder if there's an aspect of truth that is emergent and not, more than just relative to species, but is emergent from the interaction among lies. You get, you get enough. Can you see that? Can you see that? You get enough. It's all fights. The truth is all the result of fights between lies worth believing. Whoever wins those, that's the emergent truth. Another way to say it is like truth differs for people because people are different. There isn't. I'm kind of repeating myself, but I just don't think there's a universal truth for everything. Another way to think of it is maybe truth is something that has so many like layers to it, almost like there are as many layers or levels to truth as there are, from the court to the galaxy. Maybe there's an analogy between like physics of the small and the smaller and the smallest, in the fine grainedness of certain types of truths. Don't quote me. Part of it is I'm saying the same thing again, but I mean, maybe just so hard to agree on the truth. And then again, that's the product of agents with different agendas. Is there something that evolution can tell us about why it would be so hard to find to find the truth? Because it ain't looking for the truth. That might be part of it. It's like we've not evolved to look for the truth. We've evolved for the way to get our genes in the next generation of genes, and if we happen to stumble upon truth, well, I don't know, how does it help me? Truth may not be pragmatic. I probably and talk to Trivers. He'll tell you that we're much better at lying to ourselves than we should be, maybe. And is it so hard, or is part of it just a consequence of the fact that because we know and know more, or we're I could see the potentiality of just having more information about the world, about reality, as we are becoming more able, gives you more stuff to disagree about. It's funny, you'd think having more information would necessarily It's like, oh, you can solve a problem better if you can model it better, right? I mean, if you have more input about what the problem is, you can get a better result, and you can find the truth better. But maybe if we work the other way too, it's just like the more things you know, the more things you can agree about, or disagree about, and argue about. It may work both of those ways. So it may kind of, you know. I was just thinking the other day, it's like somebody was bitching about why we're politicizing the COVID-19 or whatever, you know. And it's like, you know what? It's like anything that can be politicized will be politicized. And I don't know if it's always been that way, but that seems like where we are now. It's just like, what do you mean? Why are you? I mean, like, if something can be politicized, it will be. It's almost good that it's being politicized, because it doesn't mean everybody's dying in the streets and we don't have time to politicize it. But I digress. There may be a lot more truth to find when you, which is similar to what I was saying before. There just might be more. There's more truth to find. There's more things to know. There's more things to argue about. There's more of it to find. So that would probably, by definition, almost make it seem like it's harder to find, because there's just more of it that isn't more to be contentious about. And I'll say personally, it's like I felt personally like the more that I've identified, not in terms of like an ideology, like I'm not a conservative, not a liberal, not a this, not a that. I'm just kind of, my identity is this. it's I have, it seems to me, looked at the world from many different angles or through many different lenses. That kind of inherently makes it more, I don't think it makes it easier to find the truth, because, you know, you see something from 9 different perspectives and you realize how complex some of these things are. I mean, we've built these structures on top of this and that with all this competing stuff, and we've built intellectual and real whatever tabernacles of society out of a lot of the more base, emotions and, and stuff like that. And we've, out of that roughage, we've built this incredible thing, and it's just like, holy shit. And then you see all the complexity, but then you see, and it's just like, I start looking at that and you're just like, man, every it's built on these things that we built are complicated, and there's, and it's about structures and strategies and game theory, and it's, there's so many aspects that you can just, that it's like, well, this is a bad idea except for maybe this. And it's like, you got to trust science, except for when science is too trusting of itself. And then you got to, but religion's wrong, but yeah, it can be useful, and so you should view it that way. And it's like, and socialism is bad, yeah, but it's like the more you know, it's the harder it is to just be, ignorance is bliss. Those NBC PSAs of the more you know, full of shit. They're in league with John Denver. Okay, so Jonathan Haidt, my answer to your last question of why is it so hard to find the truth is back the truck up about 10 minutes, and it's all of that stuff. And 4 more things, but I need to be paid for those and think of them. Very, very interesting and thought-provoking question. Thank you, sir. Next. David Haig. The George Putnam Professor of Biology. Harvard. Everybody's from Harvard. Author of Genomic Imprinting and Kinship. You know genome like I know genome. David Haig's last question is, what will be the use of 99% of humanity for the 1%? That's going to require a new beer. That's going to require a new beer. I shall return in a moment. I have returned. My previous beer, by the way, was Ballast Point Sculpin. Good beer. They have a whole range of flavored sculpins. They're tasty. The normal sculpin. Oh, that was the grapefruit sculpin. But they have a whole range of good beers. San Diego Brewery. But now, ladies and gentlemen, little Kentucky Breakfast Stout from Founders Brewery. This is last year's 2019's version, so this has been aging for a year. This is a flavored stout. This is like this is an orchestra, heavy on the oboe. Now this is a very flavorful. It's probably a little too cold right now. Chocolate, vanilla, and some caramel in there. Licoricey. Not as licoricey as the Goose Island Bourbon County. Woody. A little woody. Okay, this is going to be my fuel to answer David's Haig question, which is, oh boy, what will be the use of 99% of humanity for the 1%? Same as it ever was. I just let the 99% do what they want, you know? Oh, Christ. Well, it's not a complete joke about, same as it ever was. Wasn't there a ruling elite class among the Romans and the Greeks and hasn't it always kind of worked a little bit that way? Where there was maybe not 99 and 1, but always kind of some type of stratification of society. So this might be an area that we can look to our past to draw some parallels. I'm growing increasingly skeptical that history can be our guide. It's like I love talking to a good historian, but I'm always thinking like, yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, yeah, I don't know if your parallels are. I think the parallels are getting scratched a little bit, or at least they will be in the next little while. Because, but maybe we've always said that AI and universal whatever the hell were happening, and it's not going to change much. I don't know. What will the use of 99% of humanity for the 1%? I mean, how are we defining 99 and 1? Are we defining some kind of intellectual elite, wealth elite? Well, you could. You could bifurcate it, and I don't like doing this, but you could bifurcate it by like, or you could like say, okay, it's the intellectual capital, the owners of the intellectual capital versus the physical capital, or the thinkers versus the doers. But what happens when it's easier for the doers to be robots than it is for humans to be the doers? We're rapidly doing that. What happened then? And that could be one way of approaching this question. Just get rid of them. I don't know that it will matter what use they are. It leads me to a kind of a scary place that I don't know if I want to touch base on this ground of like we might just have gotten past the idea that people have to have a utility, or at least we've become so able to control our environment that someone's utility is no longer a prerequisite for their existence, or even a it's just like do what they want. I'm in my own little thing, and then the growth of digital worlds, digital landscapes, other types of reality will preoccupy the 1% enough that what are the 99% going to do? It's all well and good to say, oh, just. I don't even want to say the 99%. I want to say, what are we going to do when we don't have to do? what are we going to do when the drives that to survive and to live and to be able to procreate and stuff like that. What are we going to do? Like all that stuff is just built in. I'm assuming we get that far, but what are we just doing? Well, that's just like your birthright. It's like your birthright. You're always going to have food. You're always going to get any education that you want. You're never going to want for any of that type of stuff, no matter how you live your life, unless you're like killing other people or something. But as long as you're just a law-abiding citizen, you get everything. You get You get education. You get, I mean, I know that sounds like utopian, but I don't think if we don't kill each other first, I think that we'll get all the basics that you could, you know, a Harvard level education if you're capable, and that's something you want, and everything that goes with it. But you don't. Where's purpose? Where'd purpose go? Where'd it go? What are we going to do for purpose when all the purposes have gone? I think that might be more pressing than it certainly feeds into this question. We'll just say that. Well, the answer to that would be we'll develop new purposes because the games we play will be on a higher level. It's like now the needed thing to do isn't to put food on the table. It's to do this other higher level thing of getting my fourth PhD or getting whatever. We'll just shift up the ladder to purpose becomes that which we can't acquire without effort, some type of effort. Okay. Answer that one. So much going on in that beer. So plus we're going to need Hollywood for a while. So at least for a while we're going to need Hollywood. Yes, and that did, of course, put Hollywood in the 99%. I'm going to make it big there. What else? Yeah. I think that about covers it. I think we won't care about the use. I think there won't be as much of a battle for resources or whatever. And the usefulness of particular humans won't be that much of a question anymore. It will just be, and I know I'm being rosy in my analysis of this, that something can kind of like lose its usefulness and still hang out and be fine. Being very optimistic in my purview of humanity here, but I think even if that was the case, if just 99% of humanity just didn't really serve a purpose relatively, or unless they weren't viewed that way by the elite or whatever, if if there isn't strong, like, be like, okay, well, let them do what they do, let them do what they do. Even though I'm chafing at even conceptualizing society or humanity this way. I think it's a rough cut, a rough way to think of it. But hey, it's sometimes you got to be brutally. It's like he's being brutally analytic and cold in order to bring about, in order to question something, in order to bring about a greater flowering of empathy and open and concern and stuff like that. But sometimes you got to put a question in the most just granite, unyielding and ungraceful manner in order to get that. You got to put your finger on something that's like, oof. So, but I think we're just, I'm being optimistic. I know I am, but I think we're just gonna, utility or use is gonna fade away from being that important in the pantheon of motivations that we and perceptions that we have about our fellow person, because we'll just all be. It's like we're all on vacation, and so it's just like you don't think about the usefulness of fellow people that are on vacation. You just think, oh, you're looking at this too. Hey, how you doing? Whatever. Just go beyond your whatever, because we're on vacation. We're doing what we do on vacation. Use. Use is for grandpa. Grandpa thought about utility. We don't even have that word anymore. That's the answer to your question, David Haig. Thanks for asking me. Anyway, next we have Hans Halverson. I'm pretty sure that's an Inuit name. Hans Halverson is the professor of philosophy at Princeton University. That almost rhymes. If I had a working tongue, that would rhyme. Hans Halverson is the professor of philosophy at Princeton University. And I think Princeton actually does have a good hockey team. But I could be very wrong. They either have a good hockey team or they don't have any hockey team. Or somewhere in the middle. Hans Halverson's last question is scientific knowledge the most valuable possession of humanity? No, it's chia pets. Ooh. Well, I hate to do this again, but it's like, well, how do you define the most valuable possession? Let's do it in a general sense. What's my most valuable possession? Immediately you go to like physical, but at the end of the day, probably, anything physical that's external to yourself could either potentially be replaced or could be, I suppose not another person, but you could define valuable possession as that to which without one could not survive, could not whatever. So in that context, you'd almost have to say no, because there are other things that would, if you didn't have them, you couldn't survive. I mean, this is a very literalist way of looking at it, though. It's like, yeah, if you didn't have a heart, who cares about science? I mean, like a literal heart, but that you got to get rid of the things that you couldn't live with by definition, or because that's otherwise this is not even a that's a boring way to look at this question. Very, it's trite. I was being trite. I'm tempted to say our this might be splitting hairs, but our knowledge of the scientific method or of the scientific inquiry might be more important than scientific knowledge itself. So if we had lost the knowledge, we could regain it if we had the methods and just the way to think about it. That's a key that might be more, you know. But now that we've had that little tool set, and we've built whole cities with it, what is the relationship between that and between the tool set and the and Memphis? And what else would be the candidates? Scientific knowledge. How about artistic expression or artistic love or whatever, or artistic achievements? Do all these other things come baked in? Like, I'm thinking a sense of purpose. Is that the most valuable possession? Even though the last question I just said, sense of purpose is just going to go away. Well, it might just go away, and then we won't call ourselves humans anymore because we'll be something else. And then both answers could be right, because we won't be humanity anymore. Without our sense of purpose, we'll be something else, and we'll value something else more. Is there our hierarchy of most valuable things as we progress through some type of technological and intellectual landscape? Is it like, oh, you're at level 42 now? And does the answer change if we end up just destroying ourselves via tools created through science? Because that's certainly possible. You got art, you've got the emotions. I mean, what do you call possession? That's the other thing too. Is like where's the dividing line between something that is inherent to you and something that is, I guess, it's something that's built, that is constructed culturally or sociologically, that is not, like I said, you're not born with. So you could say you're born with feelings, the ability to feel joy and pain, the ability to be creative and stuff. What is the thing that has been built? Probably, unless there is other things that are necessary for scientific knowledge to begin in the first place. Like there's thinking of this argument that I don't agree with, but people saying that because like the scientific revolution happened in Europe and stuff, that it was built on Judeo-Christian principles, and so you needed that kind of groundwork in order for the flower of science to even sprout. It was in the in the water, so to speak. It was in the whatever. I don't really buy that, but if that was the case, then you would say that that thing which is underneath our ability to have science would be more important just by a logical extension. So that is one actual important side, whatever, of this question, because it would be nice to know that future creatures it's like, oh yeah, they get this, and then they get science, and it's like, okay, what's this? Because that might be important. I think religions are inevitable. Just thinking randomly. One of the first AI religion is going to be, because AI is going to invent a religion. And not because it was told to. We just won't look at it like a religion, but anyway, doesn't matter. Probably. It does allow us to create, destroy, discover most, I would say, not all, but many other valuable possessions that we do have, including a lot of art forms. It's been responsible. If you can't make color paints, you needed some type of science to even be able to do that. Pixels, ones and zeros. There are other technologies printing press, how about would you call spoken language a possession of humanity? Would you call written languages a possession of humanity? Because I wonder if something like a proto-science wouldn't arise, even if we didn't call it science. Something, a way to communicate, and then to spread that communication and spread, data. Even if outside of a tradition of scientific knowledge, if that paradigm, if that network opening up would happen, anytime you have a language that's communicable at a certain fidelity and with a certain type of whatever, that models reality, that could be. It probably is a precursor to scientific knowledge, I would say, almost by definition. So it is something that would spring scientific knowledge and be more fundamental than scientific knowledge, is just the ability to communicate at a certain fidelity. You get old Claude Shannon in here and start deconstructing the romantic languages and their signal noise ratio or whatever, but that might be underneath of science and be more valuable, is just the ability to communicate with high fidelity. So, Hans Holverson, is scientific knowledge the most valuable possession of humanity? No, it is the. It's my story and I'm sticking to it. I could argue with myself at night, but I'll say no. It is our. It's the tool that when we developed the ability to communicate with high fidelity, which allowed for, among other things, scientific knowledge, which is our most valuable possession. Thank you, sir. And I'm going to pretend like it is a possession and not argue about whether we could just call that something else besides a possession. So I am going to go past because I don't want to have that argument, because or yes, scientific knowledge is the most valuable possession of humanity. One or the other. Next, we have Timo Hane. Timo is the founding managing director of School Dash and co-organizer of the Sci-Fu Camp, which looks to me like an autocorrect error, but I don't think it is. I think it's some type of combination of Kung Fu and Sci. So, anyway, Timo Hane's last question is, why do we get to ask questions at all? Oh, yeah. I think the why is related to the how. I think the why do we get to ask questions at all is probably dependent, how to say this perfectly so I get even the Russian judge can't mark me down. Why do we get to ask questions at all? Because, just say it at one level, the ability to ask questions comes with, I guess, it comes prepackaged with having a model of oneself in the universe. So I'm saying, oh, why should I do this, or why is it that way? One answer would be our ability to kind of virtualize via consciousness our potential behaviors, our thoughts that lead to potential behaviors, our ask questions about our model of reality can be very helpful, because if that allows us to model our behaviors or simulate them before we actually do them, we can avoid potential pit stops and potential just like making a wrong behavior and it kills you or whatever. If you can use a model to emulate yourself, simulations are useful, and when we can simulate ourselves, that becomes very useful. And part of asking ourselves questions goes along with that ability to simulate ourselves in our own head, and then that can be effective in just like, so now we are not just limited to behaving in a certain way and then we either die or we don't. Like that becomes the criterion for whether or not the behavior was good. We can model that behavior, ask ourselves questions about it, simulate it in the context of our version of reality, and then have that feedback produce potentially better behavior, lowers the risk of that type of stuff. So that's kind of, I think, that's how it's going to arise. It's going to arise whenever we can make a model of ourselves, and the model of ourselves is going to arise whenever there's competition for, well, I'm gonna channel Dennett, but I'm gonna do it terribly. Try not to do it as bad. It's like consciousness has to arise as long as whenever there's more than one player in the attention game, like what was like the first time a being was hungry, so they felt hunger, and then they stubbed their toe, or whatever the hell it was, you know? What was that like? It was like, it's two things, but it's on me, it's one, but it's two. And I almost feel like that. I feel like that was the first, like, oh, there's consciousness. It's like there's wait, oh, I've got a, you know, there opens up a landscape of of uh, of attention, of competition for attention, of whatever, and that landscape getting a little too. I question went by. But anyway, we get consciousness. We get the ability to ask questions because it's safer than asking the questions by actually doing the thing. That's why. How is, well, ask yourself how we get consciousness, and then how we get to a self-referential model, and that just becomes out of stubbing your toe and feeling hungry at the same time. And then there you go. And then we build much bigger intellectual things out of that. It's kind of like the it's also a product, I think, of the fact that we have some leisure time now as a species. We're not we're not spending all of our time trying to find. And so I think these technologies build on each other. I'm saying technologies in a very biological way, but if you think about that, it's like if we only have to spend 7 of our 24 hours, sleeping and finding food or whatever, or maybe it's 12 or whatever, and we've got an hour that isn't occupied by that. That just gives also just a temporal time and a whatever time to just ask questions. So like the ability to ask questions is also it's a luxury that arises out of our ability to more efficiently control our environment and get resources at lower costs, so that we have time to daydream. We have time to it fills itself up in that way, and that we can daydream. And so if you've got the cycles to daydream, maybe the cycles just start going off. Like I was thinking the capacity to ponder something, which isn't that different than asking questions here, but it's like, or that like doubt as a new player in the human mental game or mental toolkit. It's like you couldn't really ponder something or doubt something for most of our existence, because you'd be dead or you'd be whatever. You couldn't think about whether something might be bad for you or not or something like that, because you'd just be dead. So it's like, it's no wonder we're not very good at doubt and skepticism. We don't have any practice at it. We didn't have any time. You can't be skeptical, and so Savannah makes you dead. Anyway, so Timo Hene, why do we get to ask questions at all? Because we self-model. Self-modeling is efficient. Self-modeling comes from our consciousness. Consciousness arises from being hungry and stubbing your toe. Thank you for the question. Our next question. I'm 90, I think 94 for 94. I haven't really looked at any of the stuff that I've done yet because I don't like anything that has my visage anywhere. But I did count the questions, and I'm somewhere around 93 or 94 now. So that's 94 in a row. So I don't know if I want to, at some point, take a break here. Because, like, I passed Willie Mays and, Jeffrey Dahmer, like 20 questions ago. So, anyway. Next on the list is Judith Rich Harris. That just made me think. Most serial killers have like 3 names. Jeffrey Dahmer, 2 names. Judith Rich Harris, 3 names. I'll let you do that what you will. Judith Rich. Okay, kidding, of course. Judith Rich Harris is independent investigator and theoretician and the author of The Nurture Assumption, No Two Alike, Human Nature and Human Individuality. That is a mouthful. The Nature Assumption. And, she's the author of 2 books, I think. The Nature Assumption would be 1, and No Two Alike, Human Nature and Human Individuality. Judith Rich Harris's last question is, how could one last question possibly be enough? Well, if that last question contained in it the seeds or the algorithm or the juju to answer or lay the groundwork for all of the other last questions, I don't think even in any type of, I don't think unless we are outside of the universe, you could ever have a question like that. I feel like even a question that gave us the theory of everything in physics would still just give us, okay, well, particles have to exist because of this, and then everything follows from that. The laws follow from that, and they build other particles, and that's where you get the universe, and blah blah blah. Even if you get that, you don't get, that wouldn't explain, why the Red Wings were as bad as they were this year. Or why it seems to always rain on the weekend. Or, there's levels of this kind of stuff, and you can't really describe, the feeling of, the music you grow up with and listening to a song like that. Again, what's that feeling? You're not going to get that from Theory of Everything. So I don't think, even if you had the Theory of Everything, it still wouldn't get you the right level, at least, to explain all of these other things. So in that respect, one question probably could never be enough. Although if the universe is you can make the argument if the universe was deterministic in a and what we think of as randomness is not random. If it's just straight A to B to C, then maybe one question could be enough if the universe really was that way, because you could just be like, oh, could a theory of everything do that? It'd be like, oh, it starts here, and then boom, it just, there's no contingency, it's just lockstep. I don't think so. I think whoever would say that would be a freaking pinky communist. With their materialistic history. Oh, I don't even start. No. So, I'm going to answer it seriously, even if it was asked in a rather tongue-in-cheek manner. I'm gonna try and be graceful enough to answer it in as serious manner as I can. So that there's a couple ways in which one question might possibly be enough. In my experiences with answering these questions, I will say that I'm, at least right now, conceptualizing every question as having something in common, or just like from a visual thing. It's like I feel like all of these questions are kind of like there's a question mark that's just over a hill, and it's just like every question, every one of these questions is like, where to next, Brutus, or what's just around the corner. It feels like every question has that aspect to it. So that, I mean, I guess I'm kind of defining what a question is, so it's not too surprising, but it just feels like it's like somewhere, it's just like it's just over our ability to see. So they're just asking, oh, what's right over the horizon on the whatever. That's kind of the definition of a question. It feels like a landscape of knowledge. It's just whatever. At a very personal level, maybe you could conceptualize the idea that keeping away from this particular list or something. It's like maybe one's purpose is to find one question and then try to answer it, and that could be a million different things, but maybe that's the ultimate. Maybe that's self-realization is the ability to figure out what is really the one question that you've got to answer, that you've got to live out the answer, and then that's another way one question could possibly be enough. Or the question could be, if the question was, what is every possible way in which we can think of to make the Red Wings win many more Stanley Cups? That would be a sufficient question to be the only question. I'm totally on board with that. Detroit Red Wings, by the way, have an excellent hockey team, except for the last 6 years. So Judith Rich Harris, thank you for your question. And I gave you a few different ways in which one last question could possibly be enough. Although, I get your point. These questions are delicious and fun, and and a lot of them are going to need to be answered. Next. Oof. Sam Harris. Sam Harris, I was originally introduced to through reading The End of Faith, so I have been knowledgeable about him for quite some time, and a fan in many ways. I wish he would maybe try and get away from politics a little bit. I think his brain cycles are better utilized in other directions, but he is an agency with his own prime directive. I get it, but yeah, sparkling mind in many ways. Sam Harris is a neuroscientist, philosopher, and author of Waking Up, as well as books about what's the one about lying, many other much more than that. But anyway, Sam Harris's last question is the actual all that is possible? Depends on if the Red Wings win the Stanley Cup in the next few years. Ooh. Yeah, this goes into... I mean, it goes deeper than frickin' Schrodinger's cat and the wave function, and does it collapse, or is it just instantiated everywhere else, and multiverse, and yada yada yada. Because if that was the case, then the actual could be everything. I mean, wow. It goes deeper than that, though. Let's flip the question around a little bit and just look at it from behind, which I enjoy. What could we conceive of that is possible, but either can't, but either has not happened, are there possible things that have not happened and will never happen, but could happen? Well, yeah, that's true. It's false by definition. You can't say something that... Leave it to old Sam Harris to give me a tough one. And I did not mean it that way. This gets really deep. I might need a minute or two. First one that got me a little bit stumped. 95 for 95. Can't screw it up now. is the actual all that's possible. Can we conceive of the difficulty with these questions is they're at the ground floor of your ability to conceptualize, it's like beneath the basement and the structure and the pillars of your own abilities to conceptualize reality. It's like you get into the basement, and then this question is like 3 floors beneath that. It's between your contemplation of, existence versus non-existence and an itch on the, it's like almost a mind lubricant. Yes, but it's not a problem. I'm just conceptualizing the actual as almost like the bubbling of kind of like new universes in a multi-universe, which that's almost the same freaking thing. It's not even that different. I'm pinning the word actual onto that thought of kind of like, it's like, I guess the way I'm saying it though is that because the actual becomes more bifurcated, more granular, more it becomes a larger informational complex. It kind of like it feels, it's like there's the possible. It's like the possible is the balloon and actual blows it up. So yes. The actual is all that's possible, but the actual is increasing at every moment. Does that make any sense whatsoever? Are they just words? This is where ideas about the universe being consisting of just information and like that's how you conceptualize the universe. It's like, so the actual is just either information or it's relationships. I mean, in a very, very broad way, relationships, almost like a freaking quantum loop gravity connection, that type of thing. I can't remember the exact whatever. Step back and take it away from physics. Can you think about it in a way that doesn't, just philosophically? Because I've got a minor in philosophy. I got a minor in philosophy, and I don't know that I don't remember ever learning about Plato's cave in philosophy. Which seems I was either drunk that day or we would have had to learn about it anyway. How would you, could you create something? Could you do something that the moment it does it, it has to be possible and it has to be actual. So but what is a dream then? What is a I'm just going to go back and say that the actual is all that's possible, but the actual is blowing up what is possible at every moment. And so, although it may seem constraining that the actual is all that's possible, it's not, because it's expanding all the time. The actual is expanding into the possible. And it's like it's like the actual is the stuff of the universe. It's the actual is the actual is what defines the possible, and but they're all expanding. I've said the same thing 9 different times now, so that's what I'm going to say about that. The actual is all that's possible, but it's not as depressing as you might think that it is, because it's big and always getting bigger. Thank you, Sam Harris. And you, personally, you are much sexier than Ben Stiller. Next we have, I think maybe this, well, let's see how this beer does me, boy. Let me stop this because this is going to be a big file. 1 second here. Okay. I don't know what that was, but anyway, it doesn't matter. Just be rubbing my neck here. Our next question is from Newt. Okay. Our next question Our last question is from David Hahn, who is a professor of early child development and culture. Early child culture, that's an interesting thought that I haven't thought of in that way before. Director of the Leipzig Research Center for Early Child Development, Leipzig University, which is in smack in the middle of Kansas. I know it well. I specialize in sweet corn. David Hahn's last question is, which facets of life will we never understand once biological and cultural diversity has vanished? I don't accept the premise of your question. God, I wish I was a politician right now. No, I don't. This would be a hard time to be a politician right now. I mean, politicians are sucking right now, but I don't envy them right now. A lot of stuff to try to wade through and figure out, and so many ways to go wrong. Whatever. Which facets of life will we never understand once biological and cultural diversity has vanished? Well, I'm going to take as then, of course, and into it as a given that biological and cultural diversity will vanish. I'm going to have a hard time conceptualizing that a little bit, because let's look at cultural diversity. Okay, we've got a certain homogenization going on with with kind of a universal platform. So you've got one common marketplace, and you've got potentially, if I'm going to take his ideas here, like you've got I'm really having a hard time accepting his givens in this question, because I don't know that cultural diversity is going to vanish. I think that there will probably always be aspects of our culture, of the game, of the system, that will encourage a type of diversity. I just really having a hard time. I mean, I know it looks like right now, it's just like, it looks like everything's going to be Google, and culture is just going to. Well, it's what the hell are you defining culture? The idea of what culture is could be changing in such a way that, I mean, what is online digital culture? What is virtual culture? What is culture when it's experienced in an environment which is not bound by the constraints of Earth? Is that still culture? And is that simulation culture in the same respect as cultures on a playground now? I really feel like where we can differentiate, there will always be enough engine of differentiation to maintain some cultural diversity. I just think it may move. Maybe it moves away from, in some aspects, being defined by our biology, or at least polarizing around aspects of our biology and aspects of our temporality, in terms of just like where we are physically and geographically, and that type of culture may reduce, but we may invent other ways of specializing culture which aren't just geographically based, or just how old you are based, or religious based, or something like that. We may find other ways to wrap our cultural differences around that aren't so so physically orientated and physically instantiated and manifested. I'm going to say those things because I'm really having a hard time conceptualizing. Let's think about biological diversity. I don't think that's going to happen either, honestly. I mean, unless I'm just not thinking of it in nearly the way that David Hahn is, which is very likely. He's probably thinking of it 9 levels lower than me, and that's fine. Are you thinking biological diversity in terms of just humanity and the fact that we're kind of maybe all mating with each other and the genetics becomes maybe like equalized or something? Because I don't think you're talking about like when we just like kill all the other species. I mean, and some of them are dying off, but I don't think we're not going to kill them all off. So I don't think that's going to vanish. And I think there will still be some genetic diversity among humans. I just don't think that's going to be that. The differences that we have that will be manifested in the lives that we choose to create, and a lot of that won't even be based in like virtual reality and other things, and computational stuff and stuff that is it's hanging by a string onto our biology and our on this stuff, so that the genetics and diversity is not that is it's not it's the muted voice in the choir. It's not that much of a thing that's being expressed loudly. I think that's my idea. But take it for the things. What are we going to forget? What are we going to... Well, what if the family kind of breaks down, and the idea of the nuclear family, the genetically based reproductive blah blah blah, if that no longer becomes the dominant kind of sociological paradigm, what do we lose when we lose the feeling of that kind of bond? What if we have what if our bonds are, what if we become so away from the blood and the bone and that our bonds are more highly just intellectual and interest driven, but interest driven it's like, oh, I love woodworking and I love I love differential geometry or different whatever. But the bond is through that. The bond is not through blood and through that, like. What happens when the things that tie us together no longer have almost anything to do with our biology? Will we invent new stuff to tie us together well enough to be tied up for fun and not for being in the basement? You think of like ecosystems and species that are going extinct, and there are species going extinct, but not, and it's like we're not the best stewards of the planet that we could be. We're losing potential cures for different diseases and different things like that because we're just killing species that might contain those cures. Is there an intellectual... so that would be we may lose the concept or the ability to think of life, biological life, as as that which also we could find cures in biology, and it's not just engineering workarounds or engineering fixes. We could find biological fixes for our biological issues, and if we lose biological diversity, we may lose that as a toolkit and as a way of looking at biology, which is not ours. I still don't accept the premise of his question, but let's just look at the world. Let's just look at the world like it's I don't know, it's Ethan Hawke and whatever in that Gattaca or whatever. Everything is shiny steel and glass and granite, and everybody's almost the same, or and differentiation is discouraged. I just think that there are too many that the game evolution wants to play does not I don't want to say will not allow, because that sounds a little. I will say will does not allow. The game that evolution wants to play, and this isn't just biological evolution, but this is kind of like evolution on a very deep level of just the universe and the world and stuff like that. The game it's playing probably isn't gonna accept a vanishing of diversity. That ain't the way it works. The diversity may change in the way that we view it, or the but I don't think that's the way the game plays out. But if they did, we might lose some of the stuff that I just said. But I'm being Pollyannish tonight and saying bad things not going to happen. It's good things going to happen. So anyway, David Hahn, thank you for the question. I know you were asking it to me specifically, but did not know it at the time, so I will thank you. And let's see if I got one more of me. I do have one more in me. Let's do this. Next question is from Marty Hurst. Marty is a computer scientist at UC Berkeley School of Information and author of Search User Interfaces. Marty's last question is, will reading and writing survive given the seduction of video and audio? Yeah, that's a frickin'... I like this question because it's a little more down to earth, but it's also a little more... It's tangible and in the... and there's real world, casualties, potential casualties, based on the answer to this question. I am very tempted to say yes, but they will become they will become they'll become like the tools of the elite, because excuse me, like so much of communication can be communicated with audio and video, and that is becoming greater. But if you want to express things at a more with like a maybe a higher fidelity or a higher signal to noise ratio, right now you do it with mathematics, and you might expand that so that reading and writing become almost like the scientific notation of 50 years from now, where it's like the only people that bother to do it because they have to be so precise about a certain aspect that it has to be written, it has to be written down, because it's literally something that someone has to take actionable intelligence from, or to or that must be translated, because translating a video is still going to be hard for a while, I think, because of the vagaries and complexities of translating video into Java are going to be beyond the beyond the capabilities of a lot of stuff for a while. So I think reading and writing are going to be like the scientific notation, and it'll be the jargon. In 50 years, reading and writing will be the jargon that now we see when we talk to a doctor, and he says the 9 words for. It'll become the jargon. It'll become the language that you only speak in. It'll be the Latin of reading and writing will be the Latin of our language. That's because it won't be needed for so much stuff, but just when you need very high fidelity, high universal transmission, the closest thing to something objective that you can get, then you got to use that stuff. So you can, it's really high fidelity, but for most stuff, the fidelity, the translatability, just the ease of use will be done with audio and video. So maybe it'll only be the scientists of 75 years from now that are spending a lot of time reading and writing. It's freakish. Writing also concentrates the mind, concentrates the arguments. It's like another step. It's like when you write something down, it's like you think it, of course, but then you think it again, because it's like, oh, I've got to write down a specific conceptualization of this thing instead of just let it come out. So it is it lends itself to, like I said, higher fidelity. Higher, Claude Shannon pleasures himself with it. So yeah, it's I think it's still going to survive, and it's going to be more specialist, and it's going to be stuff when you need really high fidelity, and you're trying to make a particular type of either concept, which is difficult, become real, or a which is not necessarily best served visually. or something be transmissible throughout time and culture and whatever, and with high fidelity, which is what I just said before. But how can it be higher fidelity than encapsulating different, like video has more kind of interfaces to what you're thinking than reading and writing. So maybe it just becomes our interface to math. Maybe reading and writing just becomes our interface to math, because you can't this can't math very well. So maybe it's just like there's everything else, and then there's reading and writing, which just goes to math, and then that's it. I don't know. I do know. I just answered it. Everything's perfect. I'm not breaking my streak now. So, Marty Hurst, thank you for the question. You're welcome in advance for the answer. It's one more. We got one more on us. Okay. Dirk Helbing, professor of computational social science at ETH, Zurich, TU Delft, the university. I think there's a lot of just spelling mistakes here. We're just gonna. Yeah, it was a late night. I had a couple beers. The Netherlands. Okay, well, I've never been to Delft. I've been to the Netherlands. I am Dutch in origin and I'm of Dutch descent. Wooden shoe. Rather be Dutch. If you ain't Dutch, you ain't much. Anyway, Dirk Helbing is once again the professional computational social science at Zurich and Delft, the Netherlands. And his last question is, what does it mean to be human? That is an emergent property. That is an emergent property, much like consciousness and truth, social truth, that emerges from the competition of humans. Tells us what it is to be human. One thing I would say is that either the answer to that question becomes less and less biological and genetic and just based on the reproductive cycle and that whole thing. Either the answer to this question becomes less framed in the context of the biological, or our idea of, or our definition of human expands to incorporate all of the things that we're going to do that are going to be non-biological in effect, in reality. I guess what I'm saying is either the definition of what it means to be human is going to be expanding, changing, stretching, whatever. Either the definition is going to be changing of what it means to be human, or we're just going to have to call ourselves something else. Because that's going to be, because the answer to this question is, it's either going to be changing quite a bit in the next whatever, or humans going to be extinct. And the answer will be like, oh, those were the people before us. Oh, you mean like, oh, humans? You mean like Homo sapiens? Oh yeah, they were before us. They didn't know anything. In another context, yeah, I think I've said it before, but the meaning of being human is kind of, it's like it's the result of the fight to be human. It's like it's the emergent property that results from everything that we do to be human as humans, is what it means. So it's kind of it's a little bit of a cheat, but it is also probably the most closest thing to a right answer, because you can't give it an algorithm unless the algorithm is, the algorithm is the result of what we do as humans. That's the answer. It's not a very pleasing. It's not a very Hallmark answer. It's not a very nice romantic comedy answer for what humans are. Human. So Dirk Helbing, the answer to your last question of what does it mean to be human is, human is what we called ourselves when we all thought of ourselves as separate. That's what human means. All right. Let's see if I got one more in me here. 19 more. I ran out of functioning neurons 4 questions ago, just in case you were keeping track. I still got beer. Next question is from Cesar Hidalgo. I do like that name. He's associate professor at MIT Media Lab and author of Why Information Grows. Information grows because the actual defines the possible. The actual is the balloon that fills up the possible. That's what it does. That's what it do. That's what it does. They should. Anyway, Cesar Hidalgo's last question is: when will we replace governments with algorithms? I'm not sure. We haven't a long time ago, but not sure that matters either. But sorry, 1 second. Whee! I mean, the dark algorithm rises, yeah. I kind of feel like I don't want to have to say the words. You get it, right? It's like you almost look at civilization as like the these like little algorithms kind of rising out of the mist a little bit, but they're manifested in historical creatures and figures and stuff like that. But certain parts of it have been like, oh, that's more of an algorithm, honestly, than it is. It makes more sense as an algorithm than as Genghis Khan. You know, we should be careful not to anthropomorphize humanity too much. When will we replace governments with algorithms? Can that algorithm wave a flag? Can we replace our territorialism and our tribalism? Should we? I know it sounds tempting and sexy to say, yeah, we got to get rid of tribalism and that kind of stuff, but I don't know if a certain type of tribalism. I think we may have to. I think we may logically have to polarize around something that we'll call tribalism, no matter what it is. I don't know that we just. I think unipolarity is a fragile system. When will we replace governments with algorithms? I put my hand on my neck, which I keep doing. Then I put it on my face. I'll have lupus in 4 minutes. When will we replace governments with algorithms? Well, I mean, one way to look at it is like the governments are still there, but they become the figureheads like the Queen of England is now and almost never do anything. It's not like we get rid of the governments. It's just that they just, it'll never be it could potentially work like the UK, like algorithms are the upper and the lower house. Algorithms are Congress. Nah, it doesn't work because you still got the president. The better analogy is like a figurehead. The governments are the figureheads, but behind the curtain is the algorithm. So that's probably more likely how it'll work. And again, going back to what I said 4 minutes ago, I'm not sure that you couldn't conceptualize it as always a little bit working that way. Another way to think about it is when are we going to trust AI or algorithms? Well, oh boy, this gets me down on a huge road that I was thinking of, which I don't know if I can simplify very much, but another way to think about the question is when are we going to trust algorithms more than politicians? We certainly don't trust politicians very much right now, but algorithms, I think, are going to run into a lot of the same problem that politicians are. Even algorithms are biased because they are biased by the data that they have to work with, that they have to crunch. They're biased by the optimization variables that they're geared to optimize. It's like, I mean, even a simple question. It's like, oh, let's have a country that's really happy. Well, what the fuck is happiness? Is happiness freedom? Is happiness having everything provided for you so you can live a life of leisure? Because those two things contradict. So your algorithm, it I don't want to go to a long way down this path, but I was thinking about something similar about how AI would work. And long story short, my feeling is that as AI progresses and goes kind of like past what we've programmed into it, we're going to start having to have faith in it, or because we won't be able to kind of like objectively measure that AI has done a better job than whatever, because we won't even be able to get into the code or do any of that stuff because it's just past us. So what we're going to have to do, and so you can't just trust one freaking AI that's just be like, oh, this is just going to do this is our savior. This is what it's going to do. We will not be able to completely trust the AI, so we're going to have other AIs, and they're going to have to compete. And so we're going to have an AI that looks like Congress. So all the same manifestations of the limitations of stuff, or I would say a lot of them anyway, are going to manifest themselves if we try to talk about algorithms, because the algorithms are going to have to compete with one another, or we're never ever going to be sure that. We're never going to be sure anyway. But either way, we're going to have an algorithm Olympics to decide, or who's going to be the next president or whatever, because they're just going to get past us, and we're gonna have to have some constraints on it. And so the funny thing is, our government is gonna, even if it was all algorithms, we'd probably still have Democrats and Republicans, because there isn't just one right answer for this shit. It's emergent truths. It's not implicit truths when you're talking about how to best govern and how to best structure society. It's emergent truths, not ground level truths. So, Caesar Hidalgo, and I wanted to say that name about 12 more times because it's a lovely name. That is when we will replace governments with algorithms. One, there won't be a direct replacement. It'll just be, they'll become the Queen of England to the algorithms' House of Lords. But they will be their own House of Lords, because we won't be able to trust just one, because it'll need to be a competition, because we're all going to have to pray to different gods, and may the best God win. It's not even going to change. It's not. Everything's going to change, and nothing's going to change at the same time. So, there you go. Caesar. Next one. Excuse me. I like to do that. Next question is from, you can't even hardly tell my shirt from the background. I don't want to brag here, but isn't that cool? I spelled the words out myself. And then I took someone else's work and transformed it myself. I'm a little bit proud of that, actually. Oop. There we go. Kind of like that. It's kind of cool. Whatever. Anyway, Roger Highfield, who's the director of External Affairs Science Museum Group, director of External Affairs at the Science Museum Group, okay, co-author with Martin Nowak, who I've definitely not gotten to him yet, of Super Cooperators. Roger's last question is, will a baby grown from an embryo constructed from human cells eventually become a person? Will a baby grown from an embryo constructed from human stem? Oh, I'm sorry. Will a baby grown from an embryo constructed from human stem cells eventually become a person? That's the question of that is. Yeah, absolutely. I would say absolutely yes. Will we put ethical roadblocks blocks in the way of that? I mean, if there were, I guess maybe if there were other ways to do it, and it was superfluous to do it that way, well, if there were other ways to do it, because I mean, like, you know, the whole getting pregnant and 9 months later and all that stuff, that's going the way of the dodo. You know, we all know that. We're in on that shit. That's going away. I mean, maybe you get pregnant and then you give it to, you know, Roberta the robot for the next 9 months, and she grows it, but that shit's going away. So what replaces it? Could be this, could be another way. If there's other ways that are more convenient, more practical, more wherever, then it's possible that this doesn't happen simply because other technologies are more easy. But if I take the generalized case of an embryo engineered from human cells and not engineered via the biological imperative, that's not only is that going to eventually become a person, it's the new black. Yeah, that'll definitely happen. What is that going to do to our definitions of the feminine, the masculine, the male, the female, our relationships of the male, the female, the feminine? I mean, assuming we live that long. This is all assuming that we live through. And for all I know, I haven't actually seen outside, so I'm not even sure it even exists. So I will just say this: I don't know if I don't even know if the illusion of what I'm calling reality actually still exists. If it does, and if we don't blow it up in the next 15, 20 years, absolutely this will happen. It will change our relationship between men and women. It is changing already. I'm just going to say 7 more times. And you do say person too, not just human or adult or whatever, because person that's a real word. That infers a sense of, well, personality, humanity, identity, responsibility. It becomes, it's a deeper level than just saying human adult, or at least it could yeah. But I think the thing still holds true. It still holds true. But will there be some type of connection that is lost, or some type of What will be lost if what I am visualizing is true, and the normal pregnancy period goes bye-bye? You know, what will be lost in that incubation of caring, of connectedness, of relationship, of, you know, that maternal thing, which is so definitional in some ways to the definition of femininity, of womanhood. And I'm not in any way saying that women shouldn't be able to choose whatever they're interested in whatsoever. I'm totally on board with that. You know, as long as I still cook. Totally on board with that, but it will change. There will be a structural, functional, behavioral, relational, and already is to a certain extent, and birth control is probably part of that. Revolution, rendering, renting, rebellious, fundamental change in a lot of things when this happens. And you put it up with the soup of everything else that's changing technologically wise and stuff like that. I don't know. So yes, Roger Highfield. That will happen. Or the generalized case of what you're asking for will happen. It will become probably the norm. It will fundamentally shake the altars and the alterations and the cathedral of femininity. And where are we going? Next question. We've got W. Daniel Hillis, and I am not happy to say I have not read much of his stuff, but he has, I know, been a mainstay here on edge.org. And did I lose it? Did you lose it? Hang on. Hang on, people. Give me a moment. Give me moments. I got disconnected. Hang on. Who needs to edit? Battery's exhausted. It's not just tired, it's exhausted. Give me 1 second, guys. Stare at my beautiful mug in the meantime. I'm getting through this. I'm making progress. I am solving the world. Somebody up, including a 10-week-old baby, so I should not laugh, because you have to be more careful than that. Respect your neighbors, dumbass. Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. Whoops. All right. Oh. We're making progress. Let's just... Ooh. Hello. I like this. Look at how my skin glows. It's amazing. Okay. Focusy, kind of focusy, focusy, kind of focusy. Good enough. Okay, there we go. Boom. Look at this. Look at how amazing this is. I'm good at technology. Okay. We're still recording. Tiny technical glitch, but we're good to go. W. Daniel Hillis is a physicist, computer scientist, and co-founder of Applied Invention, and also the author. I hate it when people raise the bar. He's not a big fan of people that, make me look bad, which is just about everybody. Author of The Pattern on the Stone. Physicist, computer scientist, co-founder of Applied Invention, and author of The Pattern on the Stone. The Pattern on the Stone. It's one of those titles that I maybe wouldn't necessarily think is all that interesting, except for the fact that I've seen everything that's comes before, so now it might be super interesting because it's like 9 layers deep. Or if you just saw the title of that book in some place without anything else, it might just be like, oh, it's just some kind of like, cheesy whatever. But it's like, oh, no, that actually might be really, really deep. Anyway, Daniel Hillis's last question is, what is the principle that causes complex adaptive systems? The principle that causes complex adaptive systems. I'm going to try and talk like a life, organisms, mind, societies, to spontaneously emerge from the interaction of simpler elements, chemicals, cells, neurons, individual humans. Well, that does assume that there's a principle. I remember going through, I think the 7th grade in school, and there was no principal there because like we got fired or something, and we got along just fine. So it doesn't have to be a principal. Now, he needs to him and Dennett need to get together, and their questions would just turn into a haiku. Well, I guess you kind of have to say spontaneously, although I'm not a huge fan of the word, but it probably is right, because what other word are you going to use? Any other word that you might use is going to imply like direction or or an intelligence. And although you're free to do that, parsimony and logical consistency and whatever kind of and just like looking at the way the world is looks to be. We gotta you, complexity comes later, or at least complexity is built. We'll put it that way. It becomes a property of a system. It isn't the synonym. I'm not even going to pretend I know how to say what I'm trying to say. I kind of want to say, well, it's just the freaking balloon blowing up. It's the if it can't, the principle is if it can't happen, it will. Which is it's not much of a principle, even less of an algorithm. The problem with Mandelbrot, he had no sense of scale. I'm going to get rid of the word principle right now and just say what. Because I'm thinking the word principle could actually be somewhat cognitively limiting in this respect. So I'm just going to say what causes complex adaptive systems to emerge from the interaction of simpler elements. So I was saying life from chemicals, organisms from cells, minds from neurons, individuals from societies, or societies from individual humans. It's like there's a conceptual or a informational hierarchy, or I mean, it almost feels like Mandelbrot or something like that. The things become recapitulated, remanifested at different levels, and they look like completely different species to us, but they're kind of like the same. This is what he's asking, I think, if I can. Is what is that? What's that brand of thing that that builds new levels of organization and structure off of previous levels of that. And he's also throwing in complex adaptive to the level above. But let's just, for a moment, let's just get rid of that. What defines the drunkard's walk? Who's telling the drunk where he can walk? I'm thinking of the drunkard's walk is like the just think about, something can be only so simple. I mean, there's a limit to how simple something can be, right? But there's potentially not a limit to how complex something can be, right? So just from it's a logical aspect. If you just kind of randomly do something, you're going to bump up against simple, and then if the bound for complex is way over here, you might not bump up against that. So it may just be there is if there's room to go somewhere, it'll go there eventually, even just without a principle, or just with the space to go there. That complexity could be just a child of possibility manifested as actuality. I'm like a beat philosopher. So is it possible that there is no principle other than just a drunk guy walking is going to bump up against the curb and then keep going the other way? Happy with that answer. I am also thinking that this question, I don't know if I want to accept the way that this question is set up, because I think that I think the question is kind of between, I think the question is more specific and less granular, because I think the huge question is life to non-life. I think that once you say what's the principle that gives life, I think you get on the highway of complexity, and so I want to just say, I want to narrow this down to what's the thing that gets you life, because I think life is a thing that is kind of almost by definition going to generate complexity. It feels like a search algorithm that goal is next. Variables are actuality, but are however many degrees of freedom are given in a certain system, it will take advantage of all those eventually. I mean, I'm trying to act like I know what these words mean. I feel like life is the thing that any system that reproduces and mutates carries within in its right there the seeds to produce more complex adaptive systems, because the ground is already laid once you have reproduction and differentiation. And you're going to have differentiation, I think, once you have reproduction, because of Newton and entropy and energy and all that kind of stuff, and imperfect blah blah blah. So I think you just have to say, once you can get a something to reproduce temporally. Maybe it doesn't even have to be temporally, but I can't even think. That's way beyond my possibilities of thinking about. Once you can get a system to reproduce, I think you are getting. I think that builds the principle for the potentiality of any type of more complex system. Because even at the level of going back 3 hours ago, one's ability to model itself in order to do things, maybe that modeling ability isn't just a conscious modeling ability, but maybe systems model smaller models of themselves in order to able to do things as models of themselves, which don't cause the destruction of themselves. And that was terribly stated and even more terribly thought, but it's still there. I'm just wondering if the question isn't more easily stated: henceforth life, and then after, and then the addendum to that is, and then just go to Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park after you get to henceforth life. Once you get the answer to that, just go to him. Life will find a way. It'll break out. It'll do this. So what is the principle that finds life or gets life or describes what life is? That's the I think that's probably, for me anyway, the underlying question that informs this question. And the answer to that is, that's obvious. I don't even want to. I wouldn't want to insult Mr. Hillis by even saying it, because it's obvious, you know. Okay, I will state it just because I don't want to be rude to the people that haven't studied this, but life is the universe's way of reminding itself where it put the car keys. So, that's your question, Daniel Hillis. Thank you very much. And next. And do I have? Oh, I got one more in me. That's it. Is that the end of the H's? Oh, I got 2 more H's. I got 3 more H's. 4 more. Oh, I got a lot more H's. Well, let's try and. Excuse me. Let's try and do one more. Okay. Next one. Next one is from Michael Hochberg, who's an evolutionist. and a CNRS. I do not know what that stands for. At the Santa Fe Institute. That is, the other Santa Fe Institute. Institute for Advanced Study in Toulouse, which is in Mississippi. Or not. Will humanity eventually exhaust the unknown? Yes. Will humanity eventually exhaust the unknown? I want to cheat on this and say no, but that's because we won't be recognizable as humanity. I would say if you phrased it, will Homo sapiens eventually exhaust the unknown? I would say absolutely not. But humanity, maybe a different word a little bit. But does that mean we'll be able to investigate all of the actual... We're inside the balloon. Are we going to be able to see all of the balloon? No. I'm going to say no to that, and I'm going to say no because even if we don't call ourselves Homo sapiens, if we call ourselves humanity, I don't know that we could even conceptualize a version of calling ourselves humans or bound as humanity and not view ourselves as kind of distinct or localized in a place and a time, corporal, having a being in terms of being in a physical place at a physical time. And I am very tempted to think and say that nothing that is subjective in that way could exhaust the unknown. There are probably unknowns that are only knowable from either being the entire system or being outside of that system. And I don't know if you could call anything human that could either encompass the entire system of that which could be known, of the landscape of the knowable, or be outside of the landscape looking in on the landscape of the knowable. Whatever that is, I think it's very unlikely that we're gonna we might call that thing Bob, but I don't think we're going to call Bob a human. Or possessing the traits that would lead us to identify it as human. We may exhaust the interesting. Well, we get to know so much that eventually it's just like, okay, how much did the third button down on Abraham Lincoln's suit that he wore for his inauguration, how much did that button weigh exactly in milligrams? It's an unknown. Does it carry information that is at all relevant? Are we interested in it? Now I'm incredibly interested in gotta know. I gotta know. Yeah, I'm sticking with that answer. I'm gonna say probably no. No being inside of a system that does not somehow occupy the whole system. RE, a singularity or something like that, could 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 exhaust the unknown. But it is much more likely that humanity may exhaust the interesting unknown. So, thank you, Michael Ashberg. One more. Do I got one more in me? Oh, wow, that's interesting. If I could get this to, is it showing up? Yeah. Donald Hoffman actually recently, I believe, had an interesting talk with Sam Harrison and Anika Harris, I think it is, about the fallacy of realism and yada yada yada. So, okay, why is it that the maximum information? Sorry, Donald Hoffman is a cognitive scientist at UC. It's a good school. It's very brief. University of California at Irvine, cognitive science at the University of California at Irvine, and author of The Case Against Reality. Guilty. Why is it that the maximum information we can pack into a region of space does not depend on the volume of the region, but only on the area that bounds it? Okay, he's talking about, why is it that the maximum information we can pack into a region of space does not depend on the volume of the region, only on the... Why is the universe a hologram? Or does it look like it could be? Why is our degrees of freedom See, this is one of those questions that you can't bullshit, and you get that essay test, and you're like, "Oh, I love essay tests because I can just bullshit my way through it, and I'll get a B even if I don't know anything." This isn't one of those essay questions. You're a son of a bitch. Well, first of all, I'll say that it may just appear that way, and we're not conceptualizing it correctly. But I mean, that's a cheater's way out, so I'm not gonna take that. It's a freaking orchestra of flavor in that thing. Should have said symphony. That would have made more sense. Doesn't taste like an orchestra. It tastes like a symphony. Okay, first chair. Anyway, why was Flatland a work of fiction? I'm just going to say this, and I don't think it makes any sense, and I can't conceptualize it myself, but I'm just going to say it because, whatever, you just say things. It's because we are creating a space in which to basically compute our reality or compute our universe, whereas the universe itself computes itself, doesn't need that space. So we're like, we have to invent a version of or a dimension of reality in which we compute aspects of reality that the universe already does, as that's its day job. It already does. But because it is not inside itself, it is itself. But if you are inside it, you have to invent a dimension of computation that is inherent to the system, but not to the subject of the system. Yeah. That is correct. I had to think about it for a second. But yeah, that's correct. I don't know why I ever doubted myself. So that's your answer, Donald Hoffman. And thank you very much. And I wish you luck in your case against reality. I am cheering for you. Do we have one more? We've got one more, and we've got about 2 more sips of beer, so I think it's going to be perfect timing. Bruce Hood is chair of developmental psychology in society at the University of Bristol, which does not exist, and the author of The Self-Illusion, one of which is the University of Bristol, and founder of Speak Easy, spelled in a way that looks Dutch, but probably has nothing to do with, it's like Zippen Z or something Z, but it has nothing to do with Dutch. It's just the way you wanted to spell it. And that's not spelled in a Dutch way either. So everything that I've said right now has just been wasted ones and zeros, as well as synapses, oxygen, and I'm killing the environment with speaking right now. Bruce Hood is the chair of developmental psychology and society, University of Bristol, and the author of The Self-Illusion, founder of Speakeasy. Bruce Hood's last question is, what would the mind of a child raised in total isolation of other animals be like? You're finding out right now. Let's try it. What is the operating system that is not dependent upon the environment? What is the what's built in? What do we just get? What's the base model? It's not even that. Because it's not the base model. It's because the base model would be a normal kind of relationship, or a normal bringing up would be like the base model, I guess. Because now you're throwing a freaking wrench into the entire thing. Because it although it's different in kind, it's not. Although it's different in outcome and in whatever, but it's not different in kind in saying what would, or is it different in kind? But what would a sparrow raised outside of in total isolation be like, and how much would those two questions be different? Which is kind of maybe where he's getting at. How much of us is programmed? How much of us is programmed via genetics and epigenetics and that versus what we get through culture and parental influence and what's the minimum? Well, let's just think about it developmentally. We're talking about the day the child is born. They're just taken away from all other humans. How much of that brain is actually developed? How would that development be stunted, but also potentially, it sounds weird, but actually maybe grown in different ways? Most of it probably stunting, but there is at least a potentiality for other areas of the brain to be super attenuated or whatever. If you grow up blind, other senses that you have tend to be more, you use more on them, you tend to become more effective and more. So how would that happen for a child? I mean, like, would some senses become more, and cognitive things become more in use because you're not. I mean, like, I'm trying to find the bright side of being raised on an asteroid. What's the upside for being raised on an asteroid? Well, I want to say it's sense of, like, when you're a little baby, you think you're the entire world, like as soon as you get an identity of self, you're the only thing that is. You are totally self-absorbed and like, I'm the only thing that matters. Would a child raised in isolation of any other animals just think that not only I'm the only thing that matters, but everything is me? Because you don't see anything else that you could even think of as me, so would you even think of as the environment around you as an extension of you? I mean, it wouldn't respond necessarily to your behaviors, but how would you even learn to codify your own behaviors? I mean, I guess you'd still do this, I guess, maybe at some point. I mean, I guess you just got, Cheerios coming down the pike every 3 hours or something, whatever you can eat, so you have to at least learn to be able to eat, and then everything else you just figure out yourself. So what would you learn, at least from just the plain fact of eating, sleeping, and defecating? And having the interfaces of sight, taste, touch, hearing. Another question latent in that is, how would your senses develop if your senses are not maybe necessary to ensure your own life? Because if you're raised in total isolation of other animals, you'd have to just be given everything and then not have any harm around you. So that might be as much of an impact on your mind as just, as social isolation. Probably not, but there's still words. I'm just filling up words. The answer to your question, Bruce Hood, what would the mind of a child raised in total isolation of other animals be like? I'm not going to give you exactly, but I am going to say the amygdala is going to be like very, like those little pewter animals that are on the little shells, like very cute and very cuddly, but not very, and it's not really going to do anything. So, thank you, Bruce Hood. It's good to see you. And I grow weary. I grow tired. My brain tired. My brain mush. It's been good for you to see me. And until next time, yes, Ronto.